Information discussed in this podcast may be sensitive in nature to some listeners. Listener discretion is advised. Laurie Partridge had recently moved to Spokane, Washington from Southern California. At age 17, she was hopeful that after school finished, after she graduated, she'd be able to return to her roots and her friends down in Southern California, down in SoCal. But life in Spokane started out good too. Laurie made friends and even soon had a new boyfriend. It was 1974. It was quite a diverse year in many ways. On the music scene, there was the rise of disco music, but there were quite a lot of other music genres that were equally as popular, now including rock, pop, and country. There was political tension in the country as Nixon was in the midst of the Watergate scandal, and in August of that year, he would resign. But for Laurie, 1974 meant high school in a new city with new beginnings and new friends. On the afternoon of December 4th, 1974, just after lunch, Laurie wanted to leave school because she wasn't feeling well. She couldn't find a ride home, so she figured that she would just walk. But Laurie never made it home. A few clues would surface, but there would be no signs of Laurie. Laurie Partridge had disappeared somewhere between her high school and her home in Spokane, Washington. Where is Laurie Lynn Partridge? Hello, and welcome to a bonus episode of the Where Are They podcast and another cold case spotlight episode taking us all the way back to 1974. These cold case stories are so frustrating. It's just so hard to wrap our heads around someone being gone for so long, with little to no clues as to their whereabouts, with no answers. How can someone stay hidden for so long? Laurie Partridge has been missing just over 50 years now. Laurie Lynn Partridge was born on May 13, 1957. She spent her childhood years in Southern California, and by the age of 17, she moved to Spokane, Washington with her parents and her 4 siblings. Laurie left behind her friends and a boyfriend in Southern California, but quickly made new friends in Spokane. She also began dating a young man in Spokane, a man who was a few years older than her. On December 4th, 1974, Laurie went to school that day as usual. Just after lunch, however, she decided to go home because she wasn't feeling well. She told her friends that she had menstrual cramps and she was going to leave. Laurie couldn't find a ride home, however, so she decided to walk. Her home was about 2 miles from the school. As the afternoon and the evening progressed, her family began to wonder where Laurie was. She also had a part-time job at this time, and as soon as her parents learned that she didn't show up for work that night, they became very worried. Later that evening, Laurie was reported as missing. Police first thought she'd run away. Now, this is a common theory we see over and over again in the case of missing teenagers. Plus, the fact that Laurie and her family had recently moved to Spokane all the way from California, it was a thought that maybe she had decided to head back to her friends in SoCal. But as her friends were contacted, friends both in Spokane and in California, it was becoming apparent that no one knew where Laurie was. Laurie's 20-year-old boyfriend in Spokane was questioned at length and was cleared by authorities, as was Laurie's former boyfriend in California. As word got out of Laurie's disappearance, a witness did come forward to say that they saw Laurie walking home from school that afternoon that she vanished. They also remembered seeing a green Ford Pinto that seemed to be following behind her. Now, I do want to mention that reports at the time and throughout the years would also state that contents of Laurie's purse were found 2 days after she vanished along that route that she would have been walking. It's not clear where this information stemmed from or where this got started, but both law enforcement and family members have come forward saying that that is simply not true. A few days later, another report came in saying that they saw Laurie in a black car with 2 other men. No additional information was provided, at least to the public, and that lead didn't uncover anything else regarding Laurie. The report stated that they saw Laurie sitting in this car in a Spokane grocery store parking lot with 2 other men also sitting in the car with her. Another interesting clue popped up when the Beach Boys came to town for a concert. Laurie had tickets for this concert. She was looking forward to it. And it was believed that she had these tickets on her when she vanished. Law enforcement actually staked out this concert, looking for any sign of Laurie, looking to see if she would use her tickets and if she would show up. But they never saw her. But interestingly, they were able to learn later on that those tickets were indeed used that night, but they couldn't determine by whom. Remember, it's 1974. Surveillance footage doesn't exist, and electronic records certainly don't exist. The mystery has never been solved as to who used those tickets that night to get into the Beach Boys concert. And I'd have to think if there was an innocent reason that someone might have used her tickets, such as maybe she gave them to a friend or someone at school bought them from her, that those people or persons would have come forward. Interestingly, as many news articles from that time will tell you, 1974 was quite a year for Spokane, Washington. The city hosted the World's Fair from May 3rd to November 3rd. This brought in thousands of people from all over for several months. Spokane was the smallest city ever to host a World's Fair, and the hope and the plan was that it would help revitalize the city. But it also brought many transients to the area. Not only visitors coming to attend the fair, it also brought in thousands of workers. Now, the fair was over by November 3rd, and Laurie went missing almost exactly a month later on December 4th. But many have wondered if maybe someone was in town working at the fair, helping move it out, helping take it down. Maybe someone who could have done something to Laurie. Days, months, and eventually years would go by with very little information on what happened to Laurie Partridge that December afternoon. It would actually be 2011 before another tip came in regarding Laurie's case. Someone called in reporting that they had seen Laurie with or near some people in a white pickup truck. Now, not much else was said regarding this lead, but it was deemed important enough to release that information to the public. But now it puts 3 vehicles into question regarding Laurie's case. First, the alleged green Ford Pinto that was seen near Laurie while she was walking home. This report came in right after the news of Laurie's disappearance broke within 24 hours. So it seems likely or probable that someone did see a Ford green Pinto around the same time they saw Laurie. Whether the two were connected was never determined. Second, a few days later, someone came forward saying that they saw Laurie in a black car with 2 unidentified men. They were apparently seen in a Spokane grocery store parking lot. Lastly, the report that came into authorities in 2011 put Laurie with a white pickup truck. So are any of these sightings actually valid? Are they all valid? Or were none of them valid? I do want to talk about a few famous serial killers that often come up in the discussion of Laurie's case. Let's start with the biggest one and generally the one brought up the most, Ted Bundy. Ted Bundy was known to be in the Washington area in early 1974, and he was believed to have traveled down to Utah and Colorado later on in the year. However, it definitely is possible that he could have traveled back up to Spokane for some reason around the time Laurie went missing. Once Bundy was arrested, first in 1975 in Colorado, and then for the final time in 1978 in Florida, law enforcement began learning the depths of his crimes. He was, of course, questioned about many missing young women across the entire United States. And authorities in Spokane felt they had a good reason to go question Ted Bundy themselves. He had been in that area during that time, or at least could have easily traveled to that area. He knew that area. Could he have known something about Laurie Partridge? And he was questioned and interviewed at length regarding Laurie, but he denied having been in Spokane at that time and denied having anything to do with Laurie. Ultimately, after many interviews with Bundy in regards to Laurie, he was ultimately ruled out as being a possible suspect in her disappearance. Authorities determined it simply could not have been Ted Bundy. Another serial killer sometimes brought up as a possible suspect in Laurie's case is Warren Forrest. Now, Warren Forrest was known to be in that exact area where Laurie was living and where she disappeared from. However, he was arrested months before her disappearance, and he could not have been responsible. On the day Laurie vanished, on December 4th, 1974, Warren was incarcerated. Lastly, there is Stanley Burnson. Stanley was convicted for 2 murders in Oregon and Washington in 1978 and 1979. Burnson would later be investigated for 28 additional murders all around the Pacific Northwest. Burnson also claimed to have been friends with Ted Bundy and said some of the kidnappings and murders that he is responsible for were done together in conjunction with his friend Ted Bundy. Stanley Burnson was arrested in March of 1980. Interestingly, he was known to be living in Spokane, Washington at the time Laurie disappeared. Stanley was found guilty of kidnapping and murdering 15-year-old Sharon Weber in Oregon and 22-year-old college student Diane Remington in Richland, Washington. Burnson was known to talk the talk, so to speak. While he confessed to murdering others and often bragged about it, as well as his relationship with Ted Bundy, authorities were never able to link him to any additional crimes other than the 2 that he was convicted of. In fact, he had confessed to some crimes that were later determined to be committed by someone else completely, and that had been proven through DNA. They also never found anything to substantiate his claims that he had committed some crimes in the presence of Ted Bundy. In fact, they never found anything to prove that he even knew Ted Bundy. Now, out of the 3, between Ted Bundy, Warren Forrest, and Stanley Burnson, Burnson might be the only possible suspect here. But authorities have said there is absolutely 0 evidence linking him to Laurie. So what do you think happened to Laurie Partridge? Laurie is described as a Caucasian female standing 5 foot 10 inches tall and weighing around 110 pounds when she was last seen in December of 1974. Laurie was only 17 years old then. If alive today, she would be in her 60s. She was known to be wearing a long hooded navy blue wool coat, something that was described as being similar to a monk's robe, a tan sweater, burgundy and plaid pants, and faded blue denim Oxford shoes. She was carrying a brown leather purse with a blue flower design and a braided shoulder strap. Anyone with any information on the case of Laurie Partridge is asked to contact the Spokane County Sheriff's Office at 509-477-4760. Thank you so much for listening to Laurie's story today. We will be keeping an eye on Laurie's case, and if we hear of any developments, we will be sure to share them over on the socials. Even though it is a cold case and so many years has gone by, we know that more and more cold cases are being solved every day. Thank you again for tuning in to Laurie's story today. We will be back again very soon with another unsolved missing persons story. And until then, stay safe and hug your loved ones.